Have you ever wondered if, upon waking up one morning, you might realize that you've missed half of your life, that all the anxieties, doubts, and internal suffering you've experienced have not disappeared, but have only become heavier? Millions of people live in this state, drowning in anxiety, sinking into depression, and hoping that medications will erase their internal pain. He believed that true healing is possible only through deep self-knowledge, internal work, and awareness of one's hidden conflicts. This is the key difference between the mechanistic medical approach and Jung's psychological wisdom. Carl Jung asserted that most cases of anxiety and depression are linked not to biological defects, but to an incorrect lifestyle, loss of meaning, and discord between the conscious and unconscious parts of the personality. He believed that true healing is possible only through deep self-knowledge, internal work, and awareness of one's hidden conflicts. According to Jung, a person suffering from anxiety or depression most often faces not a biological problem, but an identity crisis. Their inner nature demands change, but the conscious mind resists, preferring to remain in a familiar but painful reality. This internal contradiction becomes a source of suffering. Until a person becomes aware of their inauthenticity, Jung emphasized that depression is often a signal telling a person that they are not living in accordance with their true nature. Instead of fighting this signal with medication, he suggested looking into it deeper, asking oneself important questions. What exactly causes this discomfort? Why do I feel emptiness and anxiety? What in my life requires change? One of the main methods that Jung used in his practice was awareness of the suppressed aspects of personality, which he called the shadow. Someone who ignores their shadow loses an important part of themselves, and this leads to internal conflict, growing into disorders and depression. Awareness and integration of these repressed aspects allows one to restore inner integrity and gain emotional stability. He also believed that most people mistakenly perceive life as a process that should be comfortable. Many believe that happiness lies in the absence of suffering, and any difficulty is perceived by them as something abnormal. However, Jung warned that such expectations only increase anxiety because reality inevitably refutes these illusions. Instead of striving for artificial comfort, he advised his patients to accept the very nature of life, inconstant and with inevitable suffering. Only by realizing this can a person change their attitude to difficulties and begin to perceive them not as a threat, but as an opportunity for growth. Jung emphasized that personal development is impossible without internal struggle. Each crisis, each loss, and each disappointment is part of the natural path leading to self-knowledge. Attempts to avoid difficulties only lead to psychological weakness and an inability to adapt to life. He argued that anxiety and depression are not enemies that need to be gotten rid of, but signals requiring awareness and meaningful action. If a person tries to suppress these feelings with medications or avoidance of reality, they only exacerbate their condition. However, if they recognize them as signs of the necessity of change, they can transform them into strength for their own growth. Jung believed that real healing is possible only through deep work on oneself. He called on his patients to stop looking for simple solutions and instead embark on a path of self-discovery, where each step is a movement towards a more authentic and meaningful life. The key to overcoming depression and anxiety, according to Jung, is meaning. A person who sees a goal in their life, who feels part of something bigger, is not subject to the destructive influence of meaninglessness. On the contrary, they are able to overcome suffering because they understand its inevitability and perceive it as part of their path. That is why Jung asserted that the search for meaning is not a luxury but a vital necessity. That people who have found their mission are much less likely to suffer from anxiety disorders and depression. But what if I told you that the solution lies not in pills, but in the person themselves? Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychiatrists in history, argued that anxiety and depression do not simply come from the outside, but are consequences of an incorrect lifestyle and a distorted self-image. This is precisely why his approach to treatment was radically different. He did not seek answers in brain chemistry, but turned to the very nature of human existence. Their consciousness is filled with confidence, and their inner world becomes stable even in the face of life's upheavals. But to find meaning, a person must be ready to accept inevitable difficulties. Only by facing obstacles can they truly unlock their potential and gain inner strength. Life has never been and will not be easy, and the sooner a person realizes this, the less suffering they will have to experience. Attempts to avoid difficulties only make us weaker, turning life into an endless escape from reality. Carl Jung believed that difficulties are not an enemy, but a necessary element of personal development. He argued that without encountering challenges, one cannot gain true strength, since it is precisely overcoming obstacles that shapes character and inner resilience. The pursuit of complete safety and a problem-free existence leads to the fact that a person loses the ability to adapt to life and become stronger through their trials. Difficulties serve as a mirror, showing us our weaknesses, fears, and unresolved internal conflicts. They provide an opportunity to understand where exactly we need to grow, what requires change, and what qualities need to be developed in order not just to survive, but to live with dignity. Without these trials, a person remains in their comfort zone, not realizing how strongly they are limiting their own possibilities. Jung emphasized that accepting pain and suffering as an integral part of existence allows a person to gain emotional maturity. When we understand that difficulties are inevitable, we stop resisting them, complaining about fate and looking for culprits. Instead, we learn to find strength in ourselves to overcome obstacles, which makes us truly free. One of the most important principles should focus not on what is beyond their control, but on what they can change. We cannot make the world absolutely safe. We cannot prevent all losses and disappointments, but we can change our attitude to them. Realizing this truth gives a person strength and allows them to meet the challenges of fate with dignity. Jung noted that the absence of complexity does not make a person happy. On the contrary, it makes them weak and dependent on external circumstances. People who avoid difficulties become hostages of their own fears and inability to cope with reality. They hope that one day life will become easier, but this does not happen because complex situations are a natural order of things. True happiness, according to Jung, comes. That is why the most resilient and wise people are those who have gone through difficulties and have not broken, but have become stronger. They know that pain is temporary and development is a process requiring constant movement forward despite obstacles. However, many people facing difficulties make a mistake, dwelling on the past and trying to find in it an explanation for their current problems. They believe that their weaknesses, fears, and failures are due to events that happened to them in childhood or youth. But as Jung argued, such a view of life not only does not help to move forward, but also becomes another form of avoiding reality. Excessive immersion in the past and the search for the culprits of their suffering prevent a person from taking responsibility for their life here and now. While a person is focused on the past, they miss the opportunity to change their future. Jung noted that many people prefer to look for the causes of their problems in childhood, parents, circumstances, instead of recognizing their ability to change. Of course, everyone has experiences that have influenced their personality, but focusing on this experience does not bring benefits. In this video, we will analyze why anxiety disorders and depression are not defects of your brain, but a signal that something in your life requires change. We will examine how Jung helped people gain inner resilience, uncover their true nature, and find meaning without which any life turns into a meaningless rat race. This video will not just tell you theory, it will change your perception of yourself and your inner world. On the contrary, it creates an illusion of powerlessness, making a person believe that they are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Some people are sure that they will be able to move forward only if they fully deal with their past. They endlessly analyze childhood traumas, grievances, and mistakes, but at the same time, nothing changes in their present. This happens because they use the analysis of the past as a way to avoid real actions in the present. Jung warned that excessive fixation on the past can become a trap in which a person freezes in the role of a victim. When they shift the blame for their life to parents, school, society, unfair events, they thereby deprive themselves of control over their future. After all, if everything depends on the past, then what can they influence now? Instead, Jung offered a different approach. Awareness of the past, not to justify one's weaknesses, but to understand what patterns prevent one from living here and now. In his opinion, it is important not just to find out why a person is the way they are, but to decide what they want to become. Awareness of past mistakes and traumas should lead to changes, not to endless digging in oneself. A person can recognize the influence of their childhood, but not allow it to control their life. Ultimately, what matters is not what happened in the past, but what actions a person takes today. Jung emphasized that the truth lies not in analyzing the past, but in the ability to take responsibility for one's present. It is this step that distinguishes those who develop from those who get stuck in endless searches for the guilty. But why is it so difficult to leave the past behind? Often the reason lies in the fear of the unknown. A person prefers to cling to familiar explanations for their pain, even if they bring suffering, because the fear of change seems even more frightening. In this case, the key to liberation lies in deep self-knowledge, and Jung saw it in the concept of the shadow. In his opinion, it is precisely the unrecognized aspects of our personality, hidden in the subconscious, that often keep us in the past and prevent us from moving forward. Jung called the shadow those parts of our personality that we reject, are ashamed of, or are afraid to admit. A person who is not aware of their shadow becomes its hostage, and suppressed traits of character begin to control their life from the depths of the subconscious. Jung called the shadow those parts of our personality that we reject, are ashamed of, or are afraid to admit. A person who is not aware of their shadow becomes its hostage, and suppressed traits of character begin to control their life from the depths of the subconscious. Every person has a shadow, but the degree of its awareness varies. The more a person suppresses certain aspects of their personality, the more power they acquire over them. This can manifest as unexplained outbursts of anger, destructive habits, anxiety, or even depression. Jung emphasized that the shadow consists not only of negative qualities, but also of those traits that could make a person stronger but were suppressed due to fear, shame, or social pressure. For example, a child who was scolded in childhood for showing aggression may become excessively compliant in adulthood, suppressing the ability to stand up for themselves. But suppressed aggression does not disappear. It continues to live in the unconscious and finds a way out in the form of passive aggression, irritability. Or a person may condemn in other people qualities that they themselves once suppressed without even realizing it. So stay until the end, because in the finale we will discuss the most important step that will help you not only cope with anxiety, but completely transform your life. Modern medicine offers a standard solution for combating anxiety disorders and depression: medication. Antidepressants and tranquilizers have become an integral part of the lives of millions of people. But do they really eliminate the root of the problem? Jung said that ignoring the shadow makes a person psychologically vulnerable. The deeper the hidden aspects of the personality, the less consciously a person reacts to life situations. They may not understand why they experience certain emotions, why the same problems follow one after another, or why they cannot achieve their goals. In order to gain integrity, a person must not avoid their shadow, but meet it face to face. Only by accepting its existence and realizing its influence can they gain true inner freedom. Jung emphasized that working with the shadow is not a struggle with oneself, but a path to understanding and integrating one's personality. The shadow does not need to be suppressed or eradicated. It needs to be illuminated by consciousness and learned how to interact with it. But how exactly can a person become aware of their shadow? Jung offered several methods that help bring suppressed aspects of personality to the surface and begin the process of their integration. One of the ways to become aware of one's shadow is to observe what traits of character in other people cause us irritation or condemnation. Often these qualities reflect those aspects of ourselves that we do not want to admit. If a person feels dislike for people who show aggression, it is possible that they themselves suppress the natural ability to defend their boundaries. If they are irritated by someone else's self-confidence, this may mean that they do not allow themselves to be confident in their abilities. Thus, the reaction to those around us can become a mirror in which our own shadow sides are reflected. Another important method is to analyze one's actions and motives. When a person begins to ask the question, "Why do I act like this?" or "Why do I avoid certain situations?" they gradually come to the deep-seated reasons for their behavior. What is the source of fear or anxiety is something that they once suppressed or rejected. And another way to detect the shadow is to work with dreams. Jung believed that dreams are the language of the unconscious, through which the shadow can manifest itself. Careful study of recurring images, frightening symbols, and strange plots can provide a key to understanding which aspects of personality remain in the shadow. Keeping a diary in which a person records their emotional reactions and thoughts is also an effective way. Regular awareness of one's feelings helps to identify hidden patterns of behavior and better understand which sides of personality they suppress. Jung emphasized that it is important not only to become aware of one's shadow, but also to learn how to interact with it. This means not fighting unwanted traits of character, but accepting them and using them constructively. For example, suppressed anger can be transformed into determination and fear into caution and strategic thinking. Awareness of the shadow makes a person whole and more resistant to stress. Instead of unconsciously projecting their fears onto others, they take responsibility for their emotions and cease to be their victim. This process can be painful as it requires a collision with oneself without illusions. However, it is through this collision that a person gains real strength and the ability to manage their life. Many patients take medications for years, but their condition remains unchanged or even worsens. They do not gain inner strength and do not learn to cope with their emotions, but only become accustomed to pharmacological support, which over time becomes an integral part of their existence. Instead of seeking the true causes of anxiety, medicine tries to suppress the symptoms, offering temporary relief. But awareness of the shadow is only part of the path. To completely get rid of anxiety and a feeling of emptiness, a person needs not only to understand themselves, but also to find what they live for. Jung believed that a sense of meaningfulness of life is one of the main factors determining a person's psychological health. He argued that people living without a clear understanding of their purpose are most often subject to anxiety, depression, and inner emptiness. When a person does not have a clear meaning in life, they find themselves in a state of constant inner turmoil. They feel that something important is eluding them, but cannot pinpoint exactly what. This uncertainty gives rise to a feeling of lostness, which makes them seek comfort in superficial pleasures that distract from deeper questions. Jung saw the meaning of life as something more than just achieving success, material well-being, or social recognition. He argued that the true goal should come from within a person and not be imposed by society or circumstances. For some, it may be creativity; for others, service to others, self-knowledge, or striving for wisdom. Without deep meaning, any activity eventually loses its significance. A person can achieve external success, but if it is not supported by an internal understanding of why they are doing it, the joy from it will be fleeting. That is why even those who achieve great heights often find themselves in a state of existential crisis. Jung gave as an example traditional societies where people perceive their life as part of a great cosmic order. In their culture, there was a symbolic system giving a clear understanding of their role and purpose. Thanks to this, they did not suffer from the feeling of emptiness characteristic of modern individualistic societies. However, in our time, a person is forced to independently seek the meaning of their life. Unlike ancient civilization where religion, rituals, and traditions guided people, the modern world does not offer a universal answer. Everyone must decide for themselves what their mission consists of. And without this awareness, finding meaning is a process of deep internal work. It does not come instantly. It cannot be bought or taken from someone else. A person must seek it themselves through awareness of their values, their true desires, and their place in the world. But instead of looking inside themselves and trying to find a genuine goal, many choose the path of avoidance. They strive to fill the inner emptiness with various forms of distraction, which only temporarily relieve anxiety but do not solve the problem. In the modern world, there are many ways to escape from reflection on the meaning of life. People fill their time with work, entertainment, social networks, material purchases, but all these are only temporary substitutes for deep inner satisfaction. Feeling inner emptiness, a person tries to drown it out with external stimuli. They immerse themselves in an endless flow of information, aimlessly scrolling through the social network feed in order not to be alone with their thoughts. They seek recognition in likes and comments, hoping that external approval will give their life meaning. Doctors, adhering to the traditional biochemical model of mental disorders, are convinced that anxiety is merely a chemical imbalance in the brain. However, such an explanation creates the illusion that the solution lies in external intervention rather than within the person themselves. As a result, the patient becomes dependent on the diagnosis and believes that their condition is unchangeable if they do not take medication. Others try to fill the inner emptiness with work. They turn into workaholics, putting career above all else. But as a result, they face the fact that success does not bring them satisfaction. Having reached another professional goal, they feel only short-term euphoria and then even greater emptiness, which has to be filled with a new race for achievements. Some seek meaning in material acquisitions. They spend money on expensive things, hoping that a new car, phone, or branded clothes will make them happier. But over time, any purchase loses its novelty, and again, you have to look for something that will give a short-term burst of pleasure. There are also those who seek salvation in endless romantic relationships. They constantly change partners, hoping that a new person will be able to fill their inner emptiness. However, over time, they realize that the problem is not in the absence of an ideal partner, but in the lack of meaning in their own life. Another common form of escape is excessive enthusiasm for entertainment. Video games, series, parties. These activities give a temporary effect of withdrawal from reality, but do not resolve the internal conflict. A person can be distracted as much as they want, but as soon as they remain alone with themselves, the feeling of emptiness returns again. Jung argued that all these forms of avoidance lead to an even greater increase in anxiety and depression. They work like a drug, giving temporary relief, but over time, the need for new doses only grows. And the longer a person puts off meeting with themselves, the deeper their inner dissatisfaction becomes. True freedom comes only when a person stops running away from themselves and begins to ask themselves fundamental questions. What is really important to me? What is my meaning in life? How can I contribute to this world? These questions can be painful, but without them, it is impossible to gain genuine satisfaction. Overcoming emptiness requires not external changes, but a deep internal transformation. A person must learn to seek meaning not in what is imposed on them by society, but in what truly resonates in their soul. This is a path that requires courage, but it leads to true happiness and inner peace. So we have come to the end of this video. We have analyzed why anxiety and depression are not just a chemical imbalance in the brain, but a consequence of internal conflict and loss of meaning. Carl Jung argued that drugs can only temporarily suppress symptoms, but true healing is possible only through deep self-knowledge, awareness of one's shadow, and the search for genuine meaning in life. We have seen how many people try to escape from inner emptiness, replacing reflection with work, entertainment, or material goods. However, until a person asks themselves the main questions, who they are, what they want, and why they are here, anxiety and dissatisfaction will return again and again. True inner harmony comes only to those who dare to look into the face of their fears, accept the inevitability of difficulties, and find in themselves the strength for change. Jung reminded that a person becomes truly alive only when their life acquires meaning that goes beyond simple survival and external standards. Now it's your turn to think. Is your life really filled with meaning, or are you also running away from this question, hoping that one day everything will work out by itself? Patients are led to believe that without medication, they will not be able to function normally. This belief becomes an internal mindset for many, limiting their ability to make real changes. The person begins to see themselves as a victim of biological processes over which they have no control. They become convinced of their own helplessness and do not even try to find alternative ways to cope with their problems. Write in the comments what thoughts this video caused in you. Share your opinion about Jung's philosophy and his ideas. If this video was helpful to you, do not forget to like it and subscribe so as not to miss new releases. Your support helps to develop this channel and create even more interesting and useful content. Thank you for being with me until the end, and see you in the following videos. Moreover, constant use of psychotropic drugs leads to dependence, a decrease in the natural resilience of the psyche, and suppression of internal resources that could help cope with the problem. Many patients who started taking them due to anxiety or depression eventually face the need to increase the dosage to achieve the same effect. Their emotional state becomes even more unstable, and any attempts to refuse medication are accompanied by withdrawal syndrome, which only exacerbates the situation. But if anxiety and depression are not only the result of a chemical imbalance, then what underlies them? Why, under the same conditions, does one person experience constant stress and helplessness, while another retains inner resilience? Carl Jung argued that most cases of anxiety and depression are associated not with biological defects, but with an incorrect lifestyle, loss of meaning, and discord between the conscious and unconscious parts of the personality.